There is a forest in Oregon where the trees grow so dense that at noon it looks like midnight underneath them. Park rangers who work there have an unofficial rule, one that nobody put in writing but everyone follows. If someone goes missing inside that forest after 6 p.m., you do not go in after dark. You wait until morning. Because in 40 years, no search team that entered that forest at night has ever come back the same, and some haven't come back at all. 72 people have disappeared inside this forest since records began. 72. No bodies, no evidence, no explanation, just gone. The rangers have a name for the deepest part of the forest, the section where the missing persons cases are clustered. They don't put it on any map. They don't say it on radio. They call it the mouth. And I need to tell you something before we go further. The last person to disappear in this forest, vanished in 2019, was a search and rescue coordinator, a professional, someone trained specifically to navigate this terrain. I'll tell you what happened to her at the end of this video. Stay with me. The forest. The forest is the Tillamook State Forest in northwestern Oregon, over 364,000 acres. It was almost entirely destroyed by a series of fires between 1933 and 1951, an event Oregonians called the Tillamook Burn. It was one of the most devastating wildfires in American history. After the fires, the state replanted the entire forest, millions of trees, by hand over 2 decades. And what grew back was different from what was there before. Denser, more uniform. The trees grow so close together that in the deepest sections, the canopy blocks nearly all sunlight from reaching the ground. The forest floor is permanently dark, permanently damp, and disorienting in a way that even experienced hikers struggle to describe. GPS signals weaken inside the deep canopy. Compasses have been reported to behave erratically in certain sections, a phenomenon that geologists attribute to iron deposits in the underlying rock. And the forest is almost completely silent. No birds in the core sections, no small animals, just the sound of your own footsteps. And then, if you go far enough in, not even that. Now, I want to be specific about these disappearances, because this isn't just a list of names. Some of these cases have details in the official reports that the Oregon State Police have never been able to explain, starting with the very first recorded disappearance in 1973, which left behind something that should not have been possible. The cases. Early disappearances, 1973 to 1989. Case 1. Harold Weeks, 1973. Harold Weeks was 34 years old, a lumber surveyor who had worked in Pacific Northwest forests for 11 years. He knew this terrain better than most. On October 9, 1973, he entered the Tillamook Forest on a routine survey. He had a 2-way radio, food for 4 days, and a detailed trail map. He never reached his survey point. Search teams found his camp on day 2, everything intact: his food, his sleeping bag, his radio. His boots were sitting outside his tent, perfectly placed side by side. His socks were inside the boots. The ground was soft enough to hold footprints. There were footprints leading to the boots. There were none leading away. The search team logged this in their official report and marked it unexplained. Harold Weeks was never found. Cases 2 and 3, the 1980s cluster. Between 1981 and 1989, 9 more people vanished in the same general section of the forest. Different months, different years, different ages, different experience levels. A college student, a retired firefighter, a wildlife photographer, a trail maintenance worker who had been in that specific section dozens of times before. What the Oregon State Police noticed and documented internally, though it was never released to the press, was that every single disappearance occurred within an irregular half-mile radius of the same unmarked grid square. The coordinates correspond to a section of the forest with no named trails, no maintained paths, and no reason for anyone to be there. They referred to it in interdepartmental memos simply as Grid 7. And I need to tell you something before we go further. The last person to disappear in this forest, vanished in 2019, was a search and rescue coordinator, a professional, someone trained specifically to navigate this terrain. I'll tell you what happened to her at the end of this video. Stay with me. The modern cases and the investigation that went wrong. By 2015, the disappearance count in this section of the Tillamook had reached 61. The Oregon Department of Forestry commissioned an independent safety review, led by a search and rescue coordinator named Dana Rourke, based out of Portland. Dana was not a casual hiker. She had 17 years of wilderness search and rescue experience. She had participated in recoveries across 4 states. She had been into the Tillamook before in other sections. She was, by every account, exactly the kind of person you'd send into a place like this. She spent 3 days reviewing the case files, mapping Grid 7, and interviewing the surviving family members of the missing. On the 4th day, she planned to enter the grid itself, accompanied by 2 Forest Service officers to conduct a physical site assessment. So what is actually happening in Grid 7? I've spent weeks going through every theory, the geological ones, the psychological ones, and the ones that the authorities don't put in their reports, but that the rangers talk about when they think no one's listening. There are 3 explanations, none of them complete, none of them satisfying. But before we wrap up, I promised you something at the start. I told you about the most recent disappearance, the search and rescue coordinator. There's a detail about that case that I held back until now. The detail that changes everything. When Dana Rourke's equipment bag was recovered, her camera was inside it. The camera was retrieved and sent to the Oregon State Police Digital Forensics Unit. The memory card was intact. Dana had taken 34 photographs during her time in the forest. The first 31 were exactly what you'd expect: trail markers, soil samples, tree canopy reference shots, GPS coordinate flags, professional documentation of a field investigation. Photographs 32, 33, and 34 were different. Photograph 32 was taken facing directly upward into the tree canopy. It showed normal canopy, but at the very edge of the frame, in the upper right corner, there is a shape, large. The forensics team could not determine what it was. Their report described it as an unidentified mass, dark in coloration, positioned approximately 40 feet above ground level, dimensions inconsistent with known wildlife. Photograph 33 was taken seconds later. The shape is closer. Photograph 34 is entirely black, not underexposed, not corrupted. The forensics team confirmed the shutter fired and the sensor was functioning. The image is simply black, as if whatever was in front of the lens produced no light at all, or absorbed it. After photograph 34, Dana put the camera in the bag, hung the bag on a branch, and walked into the forest. That is the last record of her. There is no photograph 35. 72 people entered that forest and never came out. Some of them were inexperienced, some of them were professionals, some of them were sent specifically to investigate why the others disappeared. The forest is still open. There are still no signs at the trailhead warning hikers about Grid 7. The Geological Survey recommending no foot traffic was filed in 2017 and has not been acted on. I don't have an answer for you. I don't think anyone does. What I do have is a growing list of places in this country with a pattern that looks like this one. Locations where the numbers don't add up, where the official explanations stop halfway, and where the people closest to the truth stop talking. If you know about a place like this, a forest, a stretch of road, a building, a town, I genuinely want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. Not for content, because sometimes the only way these things get documented is when someone refuses to stay quiet about them.